The poor girl only had $5 for a blind date, a gentle story of hope and second chances. The little cafe on the corner of Maple Street was warm and quiet that evening. Golden light streamed through the wide windows, spilling across polished wooden floors and bouncing off shelves lined with jars of coffee beans. The faint hum of conversation mixed with the soft clinking of cups. Outside, the September sky was just beginning to darken, painting the horizon in shades of lavender and orange. At a small table near the window sat Emily Parker. She had arrived early, her heart nervous and her palms slightly damp. She smoothed the front of her faded blue dress, the same dress she wore to church on Sundays and to job interviews when she could get them. It was neat and freshly ironed, but it was also the only good outfit she owned. Emily had exactly $5 folded carefully in her small purse. That was all she could spare. It was supposed to cover a cup of coffee and maybe a muffin if the date went well. She wasn't sure what kind of man she was about to meet, but she hoped he would understand. The blind date had been set up by her neighbor, Mrs. Sanders, who insisted Emily had been alone long enough. "You're 26, honey," the older woman had said kindly. "You deserve someone who'll see your heart. Just meet him once. What's the worst that can happen?" Now Emily sat waiting, her eyes darting toward the door every time it opened. The cafe was lively but not crowded. Couples leaned across tables, hands entwined. Friends laughed over steaming mugs. And in the corner, a man in a black overcoat sat with a little girl in a bright pink sweater, their heads bent together over a small coloring book. The man was Robert Mitchell, a successful CEO in the city. His life from the outside looked perfect. He had money, power, and the respect of his employees. But none of that filled the silence of his house at night. Since his wife passed away 3 years earlier, Robert had been raising his daughter, Sarah, on his own. She was his joy, his reason for smiling. Tonight, he had promised her hot chocolate and extra marshmallows before bedtime. Robert noticed the young woman by the window. She looked nervous, glancing toward the door with quiet hope and a flicker of worry. He could tell she wasn't waiting for a friend. She was waiting for someone she wasn't sure would arrive. The blind date 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Emily's stomach tightened. She stirred her untouched cup of coffee, watching the foam dissolve. Her date hadn't shown up. She checked her phone again. No messages. Her $5 had already gone into the coffee she was holding. There was nothing left for food, nothing left to stretch the evening if her date eventually came. She tried to swallow the lump in her throat. Robert, from his corner table, saw the disappointment written across her face. He wasn't trying to stare, but his eyes returned to her again and again. Something about the way she sat, dignified yet fragile, pulled at him. Little Sarah tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy," she whispered, "why is that lady so sad?" Robert followed his daughter's gaze. He hesitated, then gave her hand a gentle squeeze. "Maybe she's just waiting for someone." Sarah thought for a moment, then tilted her head. "Maybe we could be her someone?" Robert smiled at his daughter's simple kindness. Children often saw what adults tried to ignore. A gentle twist at last, Emily realized her blind date wasn't coming. She stood slowly, gathering her purse. As she did, the chair legs scraped the wooden floor, catching Robert's attention once more. Before he could stop himself, he rose from his own seat and approached her table. "Excuse me," he said politely. His voice was deep but gentle. "I couldn't help noticing." "You've been waiting." "Are you all right?" Emily looked up, startled. The man standing before her was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a tailored suit beneath his coat. She immediately guessed he was someone far above her world. She offered a small, embarrassed smile. "I'm fine," she said softly. "Just a little mix-up, I suppose." Robert studied her for a moment. She didn't sound bitter, only tired. "If you don't mind me saying, you shouldn't have to sit alone tonight." Emily's first instinct was to refuse, but there was warmth in his eyes, not pity. And when Sarah peeked from behind him and gave a shy wave, Emily's heart softened. Robert gestured toward his table. "Would you like to join us? My daughter insists we shouldn't leave anyone lonely." Emily hesitated. She thought about the empty $5 bill in her purse, the shame of having nothing to offer. But the child's hopeful expression made it difficult to Decline, all right, she whispered. An unexpected conversation, Emily, sat across from Robert and Sarah. The little girl introduced herself immediately, proudly showing Emily the picture she had colored. "This is a unicorn," Sarah explained. "Daddy says it looks more like a horse with a hat, but I know it's magic." Emily laughed, the sound surprising even herself. "I think it's perfect." The ice began to melt. They talked about small things first: the weather, the cafe's hot chocolate, Sarah's favorite bedtime stories. Robert listened quietly, studying Emily with growing respect. Her words were simple, but her kindness toward his daughter was genuine. After a while, Emily admitted, "I was supposed to meet someone tonight. A blind date." She gave a small shrug. "But I guess he changed his mind." Robert nodded. Then he lost his chance. Their eyes met briefly. Something unspoken passed between them, gentle and steady. The weight of truth. As the evening went on, Robert ordered pastries for Sarah. Emily shook her head when the waiter asked if she wanted anything more. She clutched her coffee cup instead, not daring to explain she had no money left. But Robert noticed. He had spent years in boardrooms reading people's faces, but this was different. He saw the faint blush of embarrassment, the way she carefully avoided looking at the menu. He leaned slightly forward. "Emily," he said quietly, "forgive me if I'm wrong. But you don't have to pretend around us." Her eyes widened. For a moment, she considered denying it. But there was something honest in his tone. Slowly, she admitted, "I only had $5. It was all I could spend. I thought it might be enough for tonight." Robert's heart tightened, not out of pity but admiration. Here was a young woman who carried herself with grace, even while holding nothing but $5. She had come hoping for kindness, and instead had been left alone. "You've given more than enough," he said softly. "You gave your time. You gave your trust. That matters more than money." Emily blinked, caught off guard. No one had ever spoken to her that way before. A new beginning. The cafe slowly emptied as the evening grew late. Sarah, sleepy now, leaned against her father's arm. Emily realized hours had passed without her noticing. She rose to leave, thanking Robert for his kindness. "I should go," she said, "but I'm glad I didn't spend the evening alone." Robert stood as well, carefully adjusting his daughter's coat. "Emily," he said, "sometimes the best meetings are the ones we don't expect." Her heart skipped. She looked at him, really looked, and saw not just a wealthy man in a fine suit, but a father who loved his child, a man who noticed someone others would have overlooked. "Maybe," she said softly. They walked out together into the cool night air. The street lamps glowed, scattering pools of light across the sidewalk. Sarah slipped her small hand into Emily's, as if she already knew something both adults were only beginning to understand. And for the first time in a long while, Emily felt that her $5 had bought her more than coffee. It had brought her to a moment of unexpected hope.